Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Gently, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeart app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Audible, Ghana, Himalaya, wherever you find your podcast. We're really excited. Our guest today is returning to the Reading with Your Kids podcast is Kate DiCamillo. She's here to celebrate her latest middle grade novel, The Beatrice Prophecy. Hey, Kate, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. You make me sound much more exciting than I actually am. But I'm glad to be back with you again.
Well, I'm really excited to have you back, and the Beatrice Prophecy sounds really exciting to me. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
Yeah, it's a book about a lot of different things. So it's got seahorses and mermaids and goats and bees and kings and queens and counselors and prophecies and stories upon stories upon stories. But mostly it's the story of a girl named Beatrice who can read and write in a time and place when it is against the law for girls to read or write. And she becomes friends with an orphan boy named Jack Dory, and also with a man who used to be king named Kinnock, and with a monk named Brother Edic, and with a goat whose name is Enswellica. And these friends, in the end up changing things dramatically, but I won't say how. And I won't say whether or not the prophecy comes true. So it's kind of a fairy tale, a little bit of a fable, maybe.
Well, we always talk about what kind of conversations families can have when they're reading a particular book together or co-reading a book together. The first thing that jumps out to me, Beatrice is able to read in a time and a place where it was against the law for girls to be able to read. And that exists today.
Yes, it does.
And I think that's a really important and powerful conversation for families to have, I think.
I think so too, and I also think just this, on a very personal note, when you write a book, you never, or I don't, I'm never really certain exactly where the story is coming from or how it ties into me personally. But when I finished this and it went into galleys, and then I started to think about, okay, now I'm going to have to talk about where it came from. And one of the first things that popped into my head was I was super lucky in that I had a mom that read to me all the time and an older brother who would also read to me. But I was one of those kids who was just desperate to learn how to read for myself. And when I was growing up, they didn't teach you how to read in school until first grade. And so I went like trotting off to first grade first day thinking, oh boy, I'm going to come back and I'll know how to read. And of course, that was not correct. And even more than that, this thing that I wanted so much kind of like receded, the closer I got to it, because, the school system where I was then was teaching kids to read with phonics. And for whatever reason, it did not, it just made no sense to me. It wouldn't click in my brain. And I remember coming home from school and collapsing in front of my mother and kind of weeping because I was so desperate to learn to read, and I didn't understand what they were talking about. And my mother, when she finally got the scope of the problem, said, calm down, for the love of Pete, we'll work around it. That's what she said. And she also said, you're smart, you're good at memorizing. We'll just work around it. And she made me flashcards. So she wrote a word on each flashcard. And every day after school, I would come home and she would go through this huge stack. She would tell me what the word was. I would memorize it. We would do it again and again and again. And that's the way I learned to read. And I didn't fully feel like myself until I could read. And once I could do it, I felt like anything was possible. And so that story of me learning to read, even though I didn't come from a time and place where it was against the law, it was this thing of I saw how much it empowered me, the written word. And everybody, that individual empowerment through being able to read and navigate the world through words and stories, I feel like everybody should have that, you know.
Absolutely. And what a beautiful gift that your mom gave you, because there are so many other teachers and parents at that time who were probably doing the opposite and just saying, hey, you ain't going to do it. You ain't going to get it. Sorry. And those kids grew up in a very different way. So I'm really thankful that you had a mom that had that foresight and that love for you to do the workaround.
Yeah, you know, and the beautiful thing about it too, when I look back on it, is that it sends an implicit message too, which is, you know, that I carried with me without even being aware of it, which is, okay, this way doesn't work. Try another way. And that is a great lesson for a kid to get, as opposed to, no, this is the only way that you're going to learn to read. And if you don't learn this way, you're not going to learn. And, you know, you're right. A lot of parents would have said, oh, well, you'll get it. We'll work on phonics, right? That's probably what a lot of parents would do. But my mother was able to, and it was very much who she was, step off the beaten track and go, well, what's up? Let's just do it a different way.
Yeah.
And it was a really good lesson for me. But the thing too that, you know, and you understand this and talk about it as much as I do, it's just that thing of being able to pick up a book and read it, can change your life, because nobody can tell you anymore. You can do it yourself. It is so empowering, and it's just something that I want everybody to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I learned how to read with phonics, and, you know, I first married my beautiful wife, who's a teacher, a special needs teacher. I was, you got to get that hooked on phonics thing, and everybody can learn phonics, so easy. And now I'm, you know, coming out of my ignorance and learning that, you know, we have 26 letters in the alphabet, but we have over 44, I think the word is phonemes or sounds that make up our English language. And there's not enough letters.
Right. And, you know, and it's also that thing of, I mean, this is not me railing against phonics. I think phonics works great, but everybody's brain is different.
Right.
It's like, what's the way in? What works for you? How does your brain work? And so there's not a right way for everybody. It's just like, it's how your brain works.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I'm loving the fact that we're coming to a point in our history where we're recognizing and really starting to recognize that people are different, and that's a good thing, that diversity is a wonderful thing. It adds to our culture. It adds to each other. And we need to make the effort to kind of change the way we teach, change the way we interact with each other to really help everybody become the person they're meant to be.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree.
So that's a great place for families to start, just having that conversation about what a gift being able to read is, and how we still need to work hard to make sure reading and literacy is available to everybody around the world. And there's so many people that don't have a chance. Even here in the United States, there are people who aren't able to get the help they need to become literate. What are the kind of stories, conversations do you think families can have as they're reading the Beatrice Prophecy?
I think that you can also talk about the importance of friendship, and that there are people no matter what terrible situation you might end up in, you can find somebody who you can trust. And this is like, I was talking to somebody the other day who had just finished reading the book and pointed out this thing to me, which happens quite a bit when I tell stories and I don't always see the thematic links from story to story. But she said to me, in every story that you write, adults are so fallible, but there's also always an adult that is absolutely trustworthy. And it's so good for kids to know that they can find those, because that was my experience as a kid. Mm-hmm. was, I had neighbor, ladies who, 3 widows that lived on the opposite side of the street from us, three older ladies who really welcomed the neighborhood kids into their house and were interested in us and listened to us. And, what a wonderful thing it is to have your parents are spectacular. Mm-hmm. And it's also great to have another adult in your life that you know that you can trust and that you can, figure out who you are with, and this happens with Beatrice. There's the monk brother Edic, who is, a spectacular human being and who sees Beatrice for who she is. And also Kenneth, the man who used to be king. Mm-hmm. And, not everybody's going to find a goat to rely upon, but, Answelica is the most reliable goat in the world. So it's this thing it's a great thing to talk about finding those people who you belong to in the world. So it's just, that's your family, but it's also the larger world. You will find family, people who you know instinctually that you can trust and who will come and get you, no matter what. And those people are out there. And, part of, storytelling is to make you look out at the world and, something that always preoccupies me, and I can see how it shows up in my books. This is one of the things that I'm aware of, is that you walk past so many people, without knowing, who they are or what's inside of them. You walk past people, you walk past squirrels, something that I stated explicitly in Flora and Ulysses. It's like, who knows what marvels hide inside the most mundane looking squirrel, right? Mm-hmm. And so stories are a reminder always to pay attention to the people around us and the miracles that they contain.
I love that idea. And I think it's really, kind of an old way of looking at the world. It seems these days that everybody, not just kids, but everybody is really kind of withdrawn. And, I was mentioning this to my beautiful wife. We were reflecting back on last year when everybody was wearing masks and trying to be socially distant. And so when we were walking the dog and someone was coming up the other direction on the sidewalk, oftentimes either we or they would step off and give us each other that social distance, but they seem to be afraid to make eye contact and to just wave and say hi.
I am such a fan of eye contact.
Yeah.
I won't be able to find the passage in the Beatrice Prophecy, but Kenneth, the man who used to be king and walked away, decided that he was never again going to look at any face without seeing it fully. And I think about that all the time. I heard somebody, I cannot remember who this was, but I use it, and I used to use it all the time, like when I was traveling in crowded airports, and just a way of meditating instead of like looking at your phone, to like watch each face that goes past you, mm-hmm. and to say, bless you, bless you, bless you. And it's great because when you look at each face and you're not going to make a judgment about the face, rather you're just going to like bless the humanity of them, then it changes something inside of you. So, and that's something that I still do on walks. Mm-hmm. When I see, cars going past, people, I'll say it to trees. I'll say it to squirrels, and I say it to people's faces. I just think it, bless you, bless you, bless you. It's just a way to get out of my own way, and also to see, the world.
It is a great point you make. When we bless others, it really it helps us. It gives something wonderful to us.
Right. It takes us out of ourselves. So if I'm standing there, as it used to be so often, thinking, wow, this plane is not going to leave on time, and I'm going to have to speak at X time, and there's no way, none of it's going to work out, right? That kind of, that hamster wheel of travel. And so if I start just looking at the people in their faces walking past and paying attention to each face and thinking, bless you, bless you, bless you, then I'm not like on that hamster wheel of worry, which there's nothing that I can do about it anyway. The plane's either going to leave on time or it's not. It's not within my control. It is within my control to see all those people walking past me.
Yeah. I was interested that one of your characters is a king who walked away from power. It seems to be so hard for people these days. Was there any particular inspiration for that character?
Yeah, I do not know where that king, again, it's always this thing with me. It's like, where did that come from? I don't know. I just know that he is, he actually, without giving away too much of the story, he walks out of the castle one day, and it feels so good that he just keeps walking. And the further away he gets from the castle, the happier he is. And by the time Beatrice meets him, he's living in the forest and in the hollow of a tree, and is a totally happy person. And I love him. It's like there are characters sometimes that I've always wanted to go and sit in Gloria Dump's backyard, and because of Winn-Dixie. And I wish that I could go and sit in Cannock's tree in the woods and have him look at me, and I could look back at him.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important lesson for all of us. Not only if you're a king and you're not happy to walk away from it, but there's so many things that we feel we can't walk away from, whether it's material possessions or being on that hamster wheel that you mentioned about earlier and making that money. It's a great lesson, I think, for our kids to learn from us, that it's okay for you to make a value judgment and to decide that, no, this isn't making me happy. It's not making my family happy. I have to do something else.
Yeah. And who am I in the world, and how do I want to be in the world? And that brings us back to stories, because I think that's what every good story helps us ask about ourselves. Who am I, and who do I want to be?
That's a tough question, I think, for a lot of people to ask themselves, and even harder for them to answer sometimes.
Right. But, again, it's like this is, I talked about this when I was out on the road for Beverly right here, about this. There is this thing that happens in books where you watch characters decide to change, and that lets you know that you can change too. And so you might not be asking yourself the question, who am I? Who do I want to become? But story after story, when you see people make choices and go in a different direction, walk away from the castle, you think, that's possible. I can change who I am.
Yeah. So important. One of the things that I was reading on the notes from your publisher, it was a wonderful quote. I think it says, we shall all in the end be led to where we belong. We shall all in the end find our way home. Where did that come from?
Well, in the story, because it's like, where did it come from? It's another one of those mysteries. In the story, where it comes from is, so Beatrice, at the beginning of the book, has amnesia. She only knows her name. And she doesn't remember anything that's happened before she wakes up at the monastery. She's in the barn. And, the monks soon realize that she can read and write, and they're terrified. And also disbelieving, because they've never seen a girl who could read or write before. And so she does this thing where she proves to them, that she can write. And those are the sentences she writes, what you just read. And, she herself, when she writes them, doesn't know where they came from, but they're actually from a story that somebody read to her. And she doesn't remember the story at that point. She just remembers the words of the story. And, Candlewick has made a beautiful, book trailer for this book. And Sophie Blackall, who did all of the art for the book and who's Australian and has this beautiful accent, narrates the book trailer, and she reads those lines, and it's enough to like knock you over. It's so beautiful, and it promises so much. Sophie's voice is so gorgeous, and there's just a real promise in those words, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a real, hopeful. It fills me with hope, and it's certainly something that I experience in my life. We were talking earlier before we started recording about the fact that I just came back from performing for a group of kids, and 30-something years ago, I was led to the stage having never thought about performing in my life. I was a social worker and just at one point decided I needed to walk away from there, and I didn't know where I needed to go to, but some wonderful power led me in the way that has made me happy for an awful long time.
Away from the castle, as it were, and out into the woods.
Yeah.
Well,
this is wonderful. I'm really excited. I think the Beatrice Prophecy would be a phenomenal book. I can imagine middle grade kids just devouring this. Is there a plan to make this a series?
Oh, I don't think so. I never think in terms of series. That's a really interesting question. No one's asked that yet. You know what I was just thinking was maybe I should read a little section.
Yes, please.
To you. So when Beatrice becomes friends with Jack Dory, the boy Jack Dory, she's kind of like astonished that a boy her age can't read and write, because it's not only that it's against the law for girls and women to read and write, but it's that people in general don't know how to read or write. It's only the people in power who do. And so Jack Dory doesn't know how to read or write, and Beatrice decides she's going to teach him. So it's chapter 34. And she and Jack Dory are in that tree that Canuck lives in the woods. Each letter has a shape, Beatrice said, and each letter has a sound. And you put these shapes and sounds together and they become words. Do you understand? Aye, he said to her. His heart was beating fast. He did not know, he had not understood how much he wanted it to know this secret of letters and sounds and words. But his heart, pounding against his rib cage, was telling him. He and Beatrice were bent together over a piece of parchment, and Swellica was leaning over them, staring down at the parchment, too. She gave off a tremendous smell of goat. You, said Jack Dory, are in my way. He gave Aunt Swellica a small shove. She butted her forehead against his, shoving him back. Canuck was gone. Where he had gone, they did not know. He was off on whatever mysterious errand a man who had once been king but was king no more might need to attend to. It begins with this, said Beatrice. This is the letter A, and it is the first one. She formed the letter. A, he repeated. He smiled. There are 26 letters in all, she said. You will learn each of them, and once you know them, you can mix them as you will, and then use them to form the words of the world and the things of the world. You can write of everything. What is, and what was, and what might yet be. Jack Dory nodded. The inside of Canuck's tree was snug. There was the smell of beeswax burning and also, of course, the smell of goat. The bee buzzed around Jack Dory's head, Granny Bibbspeak beside him, saying, "Learn it, my beloved, learn it all, light of my heart, river of my soul." A is for Abelard. That is my family name. A is also the letter that begins the name Answelica. The goat let out an approving grunt. The next of the 26 is B. She bent her head and formed the letter. B is the first letter of my name, Beatrice, and from there to C. "What word begins with C?" asked Jack Dory. "Cannot," said Beatrice. "And when will we get to the Jack Dory letters?" "Soon," said Beatrice. He watched the letters appear one by one beneath her hand, and he felt as if each letter were a door pushed open inside of him, a door that led to a lighted room. "The world," said Beatrice to Jack Dory, "can be spelled."
Wow.
So, yeah, and that's that feeling of each word was a door that led to a lighted room. Boy, that's the way it felt when my mom was doing those flashcards with me.
Yeah, that was immediately the image that I got when I heard those words. Each letter is a door that leads to a lighted room. Beautiful. And I think that this is a really powerful way to kind of wrap this conversation up and to remind our kids that each letter, each sound, each word, each time we open up a book, it's like opening up a door to a beautiful future.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly. Yes.
Wow. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to learn more about the Beatrice Prophecy and also more about all the wonderful work that you've created.
I have a website, which is katedicamillo.com, or you can go to Candlewick's website to see all of my books. And I also, I post on Facebook once a week. So you can go there and read more about the books and when the books are coming out. And I just, before we finish, I want to say how grateful I am to every parent, aunt, sibling, grandparent, librarian, teacher who reads to a kid, and to remind the kids that they can also read back to the adults.
Yeah. And also, if parents, you're listening out there and you have a kid who really loves to read, I don't know if they do it anymore, but one of the things that I spent hours doing when I was in middle school and high school was just tutoring younger kids and helping to open those doors for those kids who might be having trouble reading in school. It's never too early to start to share.
To give somebody. Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of the Beatrice Prophecy, Kate DiCamillo. Kate, thank you so much for being back with us today.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you for listening to me read to you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Linda Elovitz Marshall and Brenda Rosenbaum will be here to help us celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, telling us all about Rainbow Weaver. That's the next episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Kate DiCamillo. Be sure to check out the Beatrice Prophecy. Also want to thank my team, Alana Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Michael Murphy. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.